I would say it's really not about comparing last year to this year. I think it's more about maximizing ourselves and finding our own way, because we are going to have new guys in new roles. I think that's really what it comes down to, and finding our chemistry as a staff, finding our chemistry as a team. Ultimately, I think that's probably it, and then continually grow as the season goes on.
Ryan, you lost so many key players, great leaders from last year's team. So you got a lot of new faces this year, but you are going to be the best offensive player watching the ball coming back, maybe the best defensive player too. What advantage does that give you as kind of reason?
Well, they both, on offense, Jeremiah certainly, requires a lot of attention. So he makes everybody else on the field better because of that. And, we have a lot of weapons on offense. So it takes some pressure off the other players. It takes some pressure off the quarterback. Puts more pressure on the coaches to find ways to get him the ball. On defense, Caleb is like a coach out there. And this is somebody who not only sets a great example on the field, but off the field and how he handles himself. If you've been around him today, you just see the way he's like a pro. When he speaks, he's thought it all the way through. And I think that the guys recognize that. And when your top players are your hardest workers, then it just sets the right culture moving forward. So to me, that's probably it. And then, as we solve problems and continue to grow as a team, and on each side of the ball as the season goes on, those guys will lead the way on it. And again, when your best players are your hardest workers, you take a guy like Sonny Styles. He's one of the best players we had in a long time at Ohio State. I just believe he's going to have a great year this season. And he's one of our hardest workers and a great leader. Just another example. You guys didn't get a chance to see all of our players today, but I think, some of them may not be as well known as the ones we just talked about, but soon they will be.
How much of an onus do you have to put on the quarterbacks immediately next week when you start camp, knowing what you have in front of you? Last time you guys over with a big opponent, Notre Dame, and you have a returning star.
Yep.
And you took one up to Ballard.
Yep.
How much pressure do you have to put on those guys?
As much as possible, yeah. That pressure started a long time ago by me, for sure, and I just think that's how you do it, and then you can kind of build their confidence as you go. But you gotta provide that pressure so that they understand what comes with being the quarterback at Ohio State, and it's our job to make practice harder than the game, and to put them in game situations, and then see how they respond. And then when they do have success or failure, how quickly can they learn and grow and get better from both of those types of things. So that's our job as coaches, and I'll be right in the middle of it.
Ryan, when you got quarterback, people out there would say that Ohio State was the team that NIL built, right or wrong. What would you say this team, how it was built this year?
Yeah, I don't think that we really listen to a lot of that stuff. I think people ask me all the time about how, when you're at Ohio State and you're in the public eye, how do you shield that from the players? Well, you can't. Because, families read it, the kids read it, recruits read it, so you don't get away from it. But at the same time, I don't think it really affected our team, because the truth is we knew that wasn't the case. When you start to find out maybe what some other teams were, providing their players in terms of NIL, you realize that maybe it wasn't that out of whack. Actually, I know it wasn't. But that never really decided who we were as a team. It was about a bunch of guys who decided to come back, and the fourth and fifth year seniors are the ones that really galvanized the team when we went through adversity last year. And that's the same thing with this season. We feel like we have a bunch of guys who, every time they hear about last year's team and they hear about the guys that left, I think it just motivates them more, because they're tired of hearing about that. This is their team, and that's good. We want an angry team playing against Texas in 39 days. So, it's yet to be seen, but the work ethic's been there, and I think we're all excited to see what this team looks like. As you know, I've never really had a feel for when the right time is. I think it's important for the locker room to believe in whoever that is. I think that's, for me, being a quarterback and being around it, when the locker room believes in that guy, that's the right time. If the locker room doesn't believe in one, then you kind of keep trying to give them opportunities for someone to grab onto the team. It didn't happen for Will until he got into the preseason last year, and then everyone in that program knew that it was his team. So we'll see where this goes. I think everything that they do in July and June and May and has led up to where we are right now, but they got to go do it on the field.
Ryan, what are a few things you like about each quarterback?
I start with Tavian. He certainly has the size, the makeup. He's a great young man. He's very intelligent. He's athletic. He can throw the ball. I think he's got a really bright future ahead of him. And Julian certainly gets the ball out quickly. He's had a good off season. He's intelligent. He really, is very competitive. He's got good athleticism. He is accurate. Lincoln is just a tremendous athlete. You pick a sport, he can do it. He's like a 4 handicap. He can hit the ball out of the park. He was a Major League Baseball prospect. He can windmill dunk. Like, he can do a lot of things. He's also very intelligent, been in the program 3 years. So they're all exciting guys that, we want to develop quarterbacks. We don't just want to bring in guys through the portal when we have to, or, when we're left in that situation, we will. But we want to develop guys, and these are all 3 guys that we have developed and want to continue to develop.
Ryan, how do you, generally speaking, tell a well-counseled player that somebody who might make less money than him is going to play well?
Yeah, best players play. I mean, that's the way it goes. And, we usually don't want that to happen because of, the culture of the team. So we try to project that out the best we can, but that's going to happen. It happens in the NFL, and it'll happen in college.
Do you think there was more chaos incoming this offseason because a lot of the NIL collectors were trying to front load their deals and there was this rush before the house settlement? Did that affect you at all?
I think it affected everybody. I think we're all trying to figure out. I think we all know now, as things have changed year after year, as we all know. We all understand how the revenue share is working, how it's going to work. I think what we're looking all for clarity on is how the third-party NIL deals will be regulated, and how they'll be handled and enforced moving forward, and how those who don't disclose deals will be enforced and penalized. And so when you don't really know exactly how that's going to happen, it creates this gray, which we're in right now. We've sort of been in this situation before. We want to make sure that we're doing right by Ohio State, but also being aggressive. I think we're well positioned. I think we're ready to move. But I think, for us, we'd like to get a little bit more clarity on how these things are going to be handled. I've heard, the conversation about a soft cap and some of the different deals and how collectives are going to get looked at in terms of the deals that are made. What we don't want to do at Ohio State is make agreements or, talk to people about certain deals and have to claw those things back because they don't get cleared. I don't think that's the right look for us at Ohio State. I think some folks are being a little more aggressive than others. That's their decision. We're always going to be aggressive, but we also want to make sure that we're doing things the right way. So all that being said, we want to make sure that we're aggressive, but we're also doing what's right by Ohio State. I don't know. I don't, to sit here and say that I know what's right or wrong or what should be or shouldn't be. I'm not really going to get into that. I'm excited to find out what the rules are so I can play by them and then find out if they're actually going to be enforced. And then we can go from there. The gray is what drives me insane. I get it. I think there's so many good things about it because there's opportunity for our players, which we all want. And I think this is the right step, where we need to be. But we're all trying to figure out how that's all going to be looked at.
Does that impact how aggressive you may or may not want to be in the current moment of how you're building this next recruiting class right now?
I think that the class that we've recruited is a strong class. I think we have some really good players, and it's a long way to December. And so again, we're going to continually figure out how we fit into this thing and make sure that we have the best class for Ohio State. And yeah, that's it. That's what it comes down to. But we're in a situation where I think, again, great foundation, some really good pieces here. And then, when we get a little bit more clarity, hopefully soon, we feel like we can be, we can go and take the next step.
Right, I think 4 different. Joey, go ahead.
The revenue sharing cap, do you have a philosophy on how you guys wish to allocate that? Do you target upper classmen, returning guys, younger guys, certain positions? Because that's now a little juggling act.
Yes.
Trying to find your value in how you first have.
Yep. Yep. We certainly have built out a couple different models for that, and it's been great for Mark to go through this process, but also with Matt Patricia, who's been through this before. He has background in GM capacity, and so I think learning more about how they structure the cap in the NFL, how they structure contracts, has been a really good exercise for all of us. What we want to do is, we want to make sure, kind of to the question over here, our starters, should be paid a certain amount of money under the salary cap. The backups should be in a certain level. And then, when you have, some depth positions, those should be at a certain level. I think where you can create some culture issues is when, guys who aren't playing are the ones that are making more money than the ones who are. That's going to happen naturally. But I think culture is going to be very, very important as we continue to build on this. We've looked at that. We've allocated the best we can percentages to all of those things. But then keeping in mind that some of the third-party things that we can provide at Ohio State is probably going to be, really great opportunities for guys that are currently on the team. For the guys who are, in high school and then coming in as a recruit, we're looking for more clarity on what's going to be allowed there. And until we get some of that clarity, it's going to be a little bit hard to move forward. We're going to still, make sure we're competitive with everybody else, but we have to make sure we're doing what's right.
Have any third-party deals at Ohio State been denied so far by the CSC, or if anybody missed a deal and lost out on money because the CSC didn't approve something in time for the exit?
Yes. Yeah, I won't get into it, but 'cause I don't think I can. But yeah, we've turned things in that have been approved, and we've turned things in that have been denied.
How much money have your players lost because
Yeah,
denied them?
I don't think I can say that. Yeah.
Ryan, when you look at
Dealing right now, you're recruiting against schools that are offering them things that are a bit pressure.
That's probably the gray area, is that you don't really know exactly how everyone does their business, and so you take them by their word and their agents and their parents the best you can, and then you go from there. But I think that's another part, is that folks don't have to disclose how everyone's doing their own business, and that's their own business. They can do things how they want to do it, and that's the way they have to figure out what's right for them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But again, the more clarity we have, the more we can all play by the same set of rules.
Background in different areas. Is that one of the reasons you decided to bring him in?
Yeah, got a great background. Is willing to work with the guys that are on staff, but also he's got a great background of. When you think about the Patriots and what he did there, it wasn't always just the same defense. He took guys who had certain skill sets and put them on the field and put them in a great situation to be successful, and that's really what we want. But also continuing to run the Ohio State defense, and that's why it took us, quite a long time. It was a pretty extensive process going through different coordinators, making calls, and making sure it was the right fit, and not just necessarily being worried about what the quote-unquote perception of a hire is. We got to find the right fit for us. And again, the feedback we've got so far from our players and recruits has been excellent about how Matt's connected with our players, and I think it's a great opportunity for him.
Ryan, what if anything can Ryan do in the summer to get ready to call plays the first time?
I think it's the organization of the drills. It's the organization of the offense. It's figuring out what fits our guys, how to put our players in position to be successful. All of those things. Figuring out what our identity is going to be, and then being able to adapt from it. Once we get into practice, we'll try to get into some move-it situations where we'll have to get into the huddle, the signaling, all those different things, so that he can have to think on his feet, making the personnel adjustments, first, second, third down, situational things. We'll try to do as much of that as we can, just to get the reps of calling the plays. And he's done some of that before, so it won't be brand new to him. But and he's been doing it. He's had the headset on, during the spring and those types of things. So the more we can put him in game, just like training a player, it's the same way for him.
Brian, you mentioned a week before spring camp started, spring camp, so defensive tackle, didn't upgrade the portal in that regard. Now that you've seen the summer work from those guys, do you feel a little better about where you are, or you still have the same concern?
Well, they're going to have to go do it on the field, but some of those guys have had very good springs, and so now they got to go do it. And I shouldn't say they had good springs. They've had very good summers. I think they're bigger, stronger. Mix really pushed them. It's been a hard summer for them, and now they got to go do it. But I'm It got to the point where there was just, for us, there was certain people that were in the portal, and the question was, are they better than what we have? And the decision that was made was no. Like, we've got to develop these guys. We got to get them stronger. We got to get more out of them. We got to maximize these guys, and that's what we got to do. And that's what the focus is going to be. And I think sometimes we just think if you grab somebody from the portal, they're automatically just going to come in and be better than what you have. Well, that's not necessarily the case. And so, based on our evaluations, that's kind of where we were. So now we got to go maximize these guys. I feel like, again, some guys have stepped up. Will Smith has stepped up in a big way. We feel like K-Mac has done a good job. Edric's got to have a huge August for us, and then the list goes on because we got to build some depth behind those guys.
Ryan, when it comes to the quarterback competition, and you talk so much about leadership, how important quality that is at that position, with a guy like Julian, who obviously hasn't had a ton of college experience, were there things throughout high school when you were looking at him, like when he was a senior in high school, that you can see or talk to teammates, coaches, and see that those traits are there?
So as you know, Aaron Nolan was committed to us, and so we recruited Julian, but not throughout the whole process. I remember recruiting him and asking questions to people in the area out in San Diego about him, talking to folks who he was at the Elite 11 with, just really trying to do our homework on him. Once he went to Alabama, we still sort of kept an eye on it, but not as much. We got a lot of great feedback on him, just in his overall ability to throw the ball, his intelligence, his decision-making ability, and the type of kid he was. So when everything shook out with Coach Saban and he decided to leave, I made zero guarantees to the family. I said, they kind of sort of contacted us and was like, we really like to come to Ohio State. And I said, well, there's going to be no guarantees here. You have to come in, and we got a huge quarterback room, and he's going to have to come in and earn everything he gets. And he's done that, and I give him a lot of credit because that was a crowded room when he first got in there. And he's working, he's getting better every day, and he's whatever he gets, he's going to earn. He's earned his opportunity to now compete for the job, and now if he gets the job, it's because he earned it. And I like the way he's worked this summer. But I think he and Lincoln are pushing each other every day, and it's not been comfortable for either of them.
Right, you've been around our lines, gotten here, you guys have kind of helped us team together offensively. 2 years ago, when you put him in that position in the spring to maybe test out what he might look like as an offensive coordinator, what did you see then that made you think that he might be ready for this versus actually being ready for it a year later?
Yeah, I think at the time when it was, between Kyle and Devin, I felt like it was important for me to be in some of those meetings and then have the relationship with those guys to help them early on. It was no knock with what he was doing. I just felt like at the time that was the right thing to do. Not that he couldn't do it. I think he still had a great handle on it, and he was ready. But now I think he's much more involved with the quarterbacks, and I think he'll have much more of a handle on what they're thinking, because I think a big part of calling plays is making sure the quarterback and the play caller are on the same page. Yeah, I've said this before, that I feel like until there's continuity between the conferences, if you're in the Big Ten, it would make no sense to have anything other than a case to have 4 qualifiers and have an expanded pool of teams, 14 or 16. Because when you play 9 conference games, it's not the same as somebody who plays 8 conference games. We've said this before. And so if you're going to be compared against that, then it's just not the same. So how does that come into play? Well, certainly you play one more conference game. And so you could say, all right, well, that's one more conference game. But then also, it's one more conference game for everybody in the conference. So, somewhere along the line, whoever's playing each other in that last game is going to get a loss. So when you have a win in week 4 against a team that loses that extra game, that win may not look as good. Like, it's just one more loss. Now, it's one more win, but it's one more loss for the entire conference. That's different. It's just different than when you play 8 conference games. It also, in my opinion, isn't great for football when you have 2 different, 8 games or 9 games, because now, you're less likely to play a game like Texas moving forward, which I think is great for college football. I mean, how excited is everyone going to be across the country to watch this first game? So I think those are all reasons for us to, want to make a case for 4 automatic qualifiers. The other part is we have 18 teams where, we took the, 4 really good teams from the Pac-12 It's almost like a conference and a half now. So all of those reasons are reasons that I think Coach Petit or Tony Petitti's on the right path in terms of for the Big Ten. What makes the most sense for us? And to me, I think it's 4 automatic qualifiers.
I know that things are changing right now with the landscape. We don't know what the playoffs going to look like. We don't know what's going to be, punitive and what's going to be. Do you have a philosophy on how you want Ohio State to schedule their non-conference?
Well, if we're going to be in a situation where we get 4 automatic qualifiers, then I think it'd be great to have a 10th game against a Power 5 or Power 4 team. I think it'd be great. If we're not going to do that, then I don't think it makes sense to do that. I think that you have your 9 conference games and then schedule other games along non-conference opponents that maybe aren't in the Power 4.
Do you feel the fact that you've been in this job since one of your 7 seasons in the national championship, do you feel like it's more company or ideas in the sport, just based on your longevity?
I think every year you learn more and you have more experience, and so you advocate for different things. There's still things that I defer to Ross and to Ted and to Tony, but then there's other things that you feel like we need to advocate for Ohio State and do what's right for Ohio State because we're unique in who we are. We feel like we're leaders not only in the Big Ten but across the country. So as things develop and change, we have to make sure that we're doing and advocating for what's best for Ohio State. I think Dan is a great coach. I think he's got a great perspective when you really get a chance to know him, which I have. But we got a chance to go on the Nike trip together, and then also play golf, this spring. And when you hear the story about he and his wife and everything his wife has been through, he's got an unbelievable perspective on the game, and what motivates him. And so, you don't always see that in coaches. So I have a lot of respect for him and not only the work that he does, but also the perspective that he has. He cares about people, and he's got a good balance in his life, I believe. He's very intelligent, and, it's always good at competing against him.
Ryan, when you went into this offseason after the championship and the championship celebration, how quick did you see Austin Servo kind of, whether it be flip a switch, whatever you want to call it, in terms of being a guy that you said this spring is probably going to have a starting role for this team?
Yeah, Austin's been great. Austin's been one of those leaders. Austin's really stepped his game up. He's going to be an important piece of our offense in a big way. He's found a voice. He's got stronger. He's got more confidence. He's playing, very, very well right now, and he's going to be one of those guys that we need. And I think when you think about Austin, when you think about Luke, when you think about Tegra, when you think about Carson, these guys all played in the run, and so there's a lot of confidence with those guys that they played in those last 4 games and won a national championship for us. So I think that confidence has spilled over to the offseason and created a lot of depth. And then when you mix Ethan in there, when you mix Phillip in there, and some of the younger guys, Ian Moore, it's a pretty competitive room right now.
Ethan was one of the dudes of the week recently.
Yep.
Just what have you seen from him this summer? I know you talked about his conditioning, stuff like that throughout the spring. Just how much progress has he been able to make?
Ethan.
Yep.
Yeah, Ethan's been, we went through everybody on the entire roster that day with Mick, and arrow up with Ethan. He's gotten better, more flexible, quicker. He's lost weight, and he's more comfortable, I think, just with the offense.
Brian, Coach Rule and Coach Schiano mentioned that one of their biggest concerns right now in the recruiting sphere is kind of the lifestyle of assistant coaches and going out on the road. Is that a concern that you share, and what things do you think the sport can do to kind of baseline that and make those lives easier for the coaches?
Well, I don't think that there should be any on-the-road recruiting in the winter for a lot of reasons. One, I think, for that reason, for the assistant coaches, but also for the guys who are playing in the playoffs, it doesn't make sense for them to be able to be on the road and you're playing all the way to January 20th. So I feel pretty strong about that, and the fact that I don't think the transfer portal should be open until the season's over. And then certainly May and June become a long run for the assistant coaches. So I think shrinking down the number of days on the road would certainly go a long way.
Do you think that for you guys on the recruiting trail, playing as long as you did, obviously you wanted to do that, but do you think you could lose ground on the recruiting trail when you have coaches that are in staff?
Yeah, I think that, and the fact that our guys, were open for 5 days after that season. We're really, us and Notre Dame, the only ones that, had guys that could enter the transfer portal. And we know, at least at the time, tampering is just something that wasn't really enforced. So our guys are getting calls and everything like this. That combined with what you were saying, we were playing in catch-up mode. I mean, the minute the next day hit, we were catching up. So it all plays into it.
Brian, that's the way you guys approached last season and years past, the 16, 17 games. How much of that is applied to the personnel you had last year, great defense and running game, versus that may be something you want to adopt consistently going forward?
Yeah, a little bit of both, but a little bit is the length of the season too, and the number of plays. Again, that's something I learned when I was in the NFL in the first year with the Eagles. We played fast, and our number of plays were like a lot, and so it took a lot of stress on our team. And so I think there's times we need to use it as a weapon, but I think it's something that I didn't really get into last year because I didn't want anyone to really think or talk about it. But I felt like it really helped us. I think we cut down. Was it 150 to 200 plays from the year before? And I think that helped with us playing fast at the end of the season.
Does that change? I mean, are you guys going to go with practice in terms of what you emphasize, what you focus on, simply because instead of 75 plus plays, maybe it's 60, 65 plays?
Yeah, when you're huddling, it's different than when you're playing on the ball. There's just a different feel to it. There's a different communication. If I'm a receiver, I have to run all the way into the line to the huddle, and then I have to run back out, as opposed to just lining back to the line of scrimmage. I mean, there's a lot that comes with that. So we want to practice what we're going to do in a game. We usually carry everything and try to adapt based on how the game's going. But we'll see what fits this team the best.
Ryan, has Carlos Loughlin or Pete Rozelle asked you, Ross, for Ohio State to increase what he contributed to his buyout at Oregon, just to put that matter to rest?
I know that there's been conversation there, but I don't know the latest update on it.
If they interpreted the buyout as $400,000 originally, would that have prevented you from hiring him at Ohio State originally, rather than interpreting it as $200,000?
I think that ultimately would have been, his decision. Yeah.
Brian, you lost 2 1,000-yard running backs who second-round picks from the program. I know you like James, you like CJ. What's your level of confidence in that room?
It's pretty high, but they have to do it. They haven't done anything yet. I like the way they're working. I like the way they work in terms of off the field, on the field. They've gotten stronger, but they're going to have to take care of the football, protect, and do all those things. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about young guys who haven't done it before. So running backs are hard because you don't really tackle them a lot during the preseason. We did a lot in the spring, more than we ever have before. I liked what we saw there, but they're going to have a big summer in terms of August camp, and then grow from there. I think CJ has really changed his body. He looks stronger. He looks like he's in a good place. I think all of them across the board have a chance to be 3-down backs, which is exciting. So Carlos has done a nice job of building depth there, but there's not a lot of experience. So it's good and bad. You don't know what you're getting, but at the same time, we see some talent there, and we think that there's a chance to have a special room.
Bo Jackson impressed in the spring. Is
Yep.
he a guy who could really contribute?
I don't know early. I think we'll have to see how that goes, but as the season goes on, yes, for sure.
Reg, I think last year you guys had regular season, CFP. Is there anything you guys seem to revamp the entire offense right now? Do you think that there's anything that you can learn from that month in preparation for Tennessee and apply it to the 1 month that you're allotted to for Tennessee?
I think it really wasn't an entire new offense. I think a big part of it was when we lost Simmons and Donovan got moved to tackle, and then guys got thrust into new roles. Then when we lost Seth, that really changed things. And it took us a few weeks to get our feet underneath us and figure out what fit those guys, as opposed to because really it was 3 different positions. Because Donnie went to tackle, Simmons was out, McLaughlin was out. So 3 out of 5 were playing new positions. And then figuring out, because we felt like we had a good rhythm going into that Oregon game on who we were and what we were doing. And then when you put new guys in there, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the right fit. I think it took us a little time to figure that out. And then once we got in a role, we sort of figured it out. And, that group, we felt like you could see in that Tennessee game, it was a gap scheme. Counter was big in that game. We felt like that was the right thing in that moment with those guys, and then it kind of built from there.
Ryan, you said that how do you beat Michigan?
By scoring more points on them.
Ryan, you said you asked if you could maybe bring more than 3 guys out here. I'm sure that the list is probably like 6 or 7 long, but who was right there on the cut line that earned the opportunity in addition to these 3?
Austin Saravelt would definitely have been there. Kenyatta Jackson definitely would have been there.
Austin probably didn't want to go.
Yeah, Austin. Yeah, but he's found his voice. He's done a nice job. He's gotten stronger. He's had a really good summer, and I think he is the voice right now. I would say Luke is probably Carson. Actually, is right there too. I'd say Carson would be another one that would be in consideration for coming. They've been better in terms of speaking up. So I thought they've been great. I'll tell you another guy who's really taken a step as a leader is Bennett Christian. Yeah. He's been great. Carnell Tate is probably, let me take that back. He's probably taken the biggest step as a leader. Yeah, Carnell Tate. He's been great. Brandon Ennis has been a really good leader. Yeah, I would probably say those guys right now are the top ones that would be right.
Ryan, you said you'd be for the AQ format, playing games, apparently 6 versus 3, 4 versus 5. In that format, would you be in favor or against the 1 versus 2 game not happening anymore? Because those teams are guaranteed a spot in the playoff. So why play that additional game, risk injury? I understand, you could determine the champion in the regular season. Do you have any thoughts on
Yeah.
1 versus 2 if we do get to that AQ format?
Yeah, and I think Tony has some really good ideas around that, of having play-in games, of having 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6 also play during that week. But to your point, I think one of the concerns is just one extra game and beating up the conference. And so I think it's something that definitely needs to be shaken out and talked through. I agree with you. I kind of brought it up about 3 years ago. Is the Big Ten championship game the right thing as we get into the playoff model? They don't have that in the NFL. But I also understand what it brings to the conference. So I think it's a really good conversation that I think has great arguments on both sides.
Do you think you benefited last year from not having to have that extra game? I mean, looking back,
It's a good question.
you would add an additional game plus the playoff run you made.
I don't know. I know that losing the last game gave us an edge for sure. Yeah, but not playing in the Big Ten championship game or playing in the Big Ten championship game, we would have got a bye. So I guess it all would have shaken out the same way.
Ohio State was something influences were the 18th best player in the class at the top of the player count. Now, obviously, the talent is kind of getting spread out a bit more because of the sports change. You guys had a super team last year that you brought back and added, but from your vantage point, as a defending national champion, do you view that the baseline level of talent at Ohio State or other teams has in the class is lower now than it might have been 3 years ago? Do you feel that on a day-to-day basis as in your building?
I think it's to be determined. I think that we're still recruiting at a very high level, and we'll continue to do that. I just think we have to figure out where we need to win in the margins and how we got to find advantages being at Ohio State. But it's just a different format. And to your point with the revenue sharing, that's equal. Where I think the delta can be is with the third party NIL. And figuring that part of it out. And I think that's important for Ohio State to figure out how do we continue to be leaders moving forward. And I do think we're well positioned in where we are, the culture of the program, the brand, the city, all the different businesses that are in the area. But I think that's the part that we're still working through.
Do you anticipate it's possible, though, like in 2030, that Ohio State, even with all those advantages, the businesses, the size of the university, that your talent advantage on average on a week-to-week basis will be greatly diminished than what you guys built the last 3 years?
No, I don't. I just think when you look at college football in the last 100 years. When you look where Ohio State's been, because of all of our advantages and things that we have, I just don't see it going that way. It's just a different format, and we have to figure that part of it out.
To your point,
Yeah.
tackling
As
more.
far as the scheduling goes for future years, and you're talking about that 10-hour conference game, you have some home and homes coming up in the future, like not just Texas, but
Yeah.
Alabama and Georgia. Are those, would you ever change those, or are you talking more about getting adding in future years?
Well, yeah, I mean, what's scheduled is scheduled, so we can't really, I don't really have a whole lot to say about those. But in terms of moving forward and scheduling more games, I would say that would be the thought process.
To your point about tackling more in the spring, you mentioned, I think after the spring game and another good points in the spring, that 7-on-7 football is not always real football. You gotta see live bullets fly. That's that kind of stuff. 7-on-7 is being emphasized, it seems like, more at the grassroots level. How do you think that is affecting quarterback development?
Yeah, I mean, 7-on-7 isn't even close to real football. I think it's good. It's better than nothing, but it's not football. There's times where it can have diminishing returns for quarterbacks, I think. You're throwing over linemen. You're dealing with rush. There's just so many things that come into play. And so, the route concepts, when I watch some of these 7-on-7s, aren't even real concepts. But the throwing, the catching, the route running by the receivers, the coverage by the DBs, that's all really good. I think you're seeing a lot of perimeter players and skill players improve with their skill sets because of how much they do it. I wish there was ways to do that with offensive and defensive linemen. I still think that there's something to be done with young people, getting them involved at a younger age in something like a 7-on-7, which is not very easy to do, but we need to continue to engage linemen across the board, because I think that's right now where there hasn't been as much development as there has been at the skill positions.
Is there another way for quarterbacks to get more of a live ball experience?
It's a great question. I mean, I think about it all the time. I have a young, high school son who, I try to do that very thing, but no. I mean, you can't replicate playing the game. And when you think about the quarterbacks, let's just say they play 10 high school games out of the year. When you're playing basketball, when you're playing lacrosse, when you're playing soccer, you're playing 10 games in a weekend. So that's why I think you see sometimes the quarterback position, there's just so much, whether it's in the NFL or whether it's in college, there's still a lot of indecision on who the right player is. And I still think we still try to project where these guys can go when a lot of them haven't played a lot of quarterback. They haven't played in games before. So sometimes you're seeing the more experienced guys, like a guy like Will Howard's a great example, like Bo Nix, Michael Penix. Some of these guys who have been through it before, they have learned from their experiences, and they've become better because they've actually played in games.
Ryan, speaking of RJ, he's got double-digit offers now, and you've been involved in those conversations as recruit dad. How different is that? What have you learned from that process? I mean, have you heard anything from other coaches that you're like, oh, I should?
Yeah, you learn a lot going different places, and as a dad going in. But the one thing I've learned is that people have great facilities, they have great locker rooms, they have great weight rooms, but it's all about the people. Who's going to raise your son? Who's going to raise my son on a daily basis and just learn about life? Who loves the game of football, but also is going to treat him the right way. And it makes you realize as a dad, those types of things when you're sending your son somewhere. But as a coach, it's like you always know it, but the right answer is, when you're trying to make a decision, is how would you want your son treated? And that brings you to the right answer all the time. And, you always know that, but it just makes it more evident when you're going through that process.
Right, we saw this two more in Jackson a little bit. Obviously, that didn't work out the same way given some injuries we saw with Marv going into that second year of them being a pounded for the offense. Maybe the way that maybe got you creative uses as a play caller, as a schemer going, without going into the details, obviously, but how does second year Jeremiah Smith get you going from a schematic standpoint, what you may or may not be able to do in the process?
Well, you have to be creative about, how you get him the ball, but he also is going to make everybody better on that field because he's going to draw a lot of attention. And so it's going to be important for the quarterback to recognize that and then use the other weapons that he has. The run game will be very important, but also, you're talking about Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis and Bryson Rogers. Our tight ends are in a good place right now. Our running backs can hurt you out of the backfield. You saw what Travion and Quinshawn did last year. So it's a weapon for us because people are going to always break the huddle and want to know where he is. So it opens up the rest of the field for us, which is great. I think you remember the Texas game last year. I think Carnell was our leading receiver, and so that just how that played. And I think it's the quarterback's job to recognize there's times where we're going to design something for Jeremiah in particular. There's other times where we just have to go through the read and figure out where the read takes us, and then force teams to balance up a little bit. And so I think that's really the bottom line. But we went through that with Marvin, like you remember that year, and so we have some experience doing that.
How do you handle that? I know from 6 months ago, being taken away like that, not necessarily being a heavy part of what the offense was when we touched the ball.
Yeah.
I feel like you handle that.
Yeah, it's not easy especially when you're as competitive as these guys are. They want the ball, so it's a conversation. It's not easy, and that's the emotional maturity that's going to have to take place when the number one goal is to win.
How do you prepare for that when you know the teams are going to try to be pretty aggressive to take it away, but you also want to get the ball to the best player? How do you prepare for that kind of over the summer and on a week-to-week basis of knowing that okay, they might throw something at us that we haven't seen yet with Jeremiah?
Yeah, if they're doing that, then they're doing something that they're not. Maybe they're comfortable doing it, but it's not what they typically do on a day-to-day basis. So now they're doing something that they're not used to. So my experience with that over the years is that they're not as effective and as efficient as they are playing the stuff that they know the best.
Given how Jeremiah played at such young ages, especially in the playoffs last year, what is a better version of Jeremiah look like on the field this season? He looked on the field this season.
Yeah, bigger, faster, stronger, more mature, seeing things faster, transitionally in and out of breaks. Everything's going to slow down for them, in this next year. We think about the first half of the season for Jeremiah. He did some great things, but it was all moving fast for him. And then the second half, obviously, you saw it slow down for him and speed up for everybody else. So I think just more of a complete season doing that. Yeah, but I think, the rule's in place for a reason. He's 19 years old, and so there's still a lot of growing that needs to happen and maturity that has to happen. But, yeah, his talent, it's pretty remarkable. I think he's, at his age, he's further along than anybody I've ever been around. Yeah.